Creating sprites with the Sprite Editor. Okay, so in GameMaker, we do things in a fairly specific order and almost always in this order. We create a sprite, then we create an object, we give that object functionality, we put that object in our room, and that runs our game. We're going to create a sprite by choosing Sprites, right-click on Sprites, create a sprite. And it created in the Sprites folder. Now actually, it's really easy for students to create their sprites in the wrong folder. Unfortunately, Studio 2 allows us to do this. So if you create a sprite and it's in the scripts folder, you can always just move it. You don't have to delete it and redo it, especially if you have a lot of work in it. You can always just grab a hold of that sprite and drag it down to the Sprites folder. Now I have two sprites in here, but they are in the right folder. I don't really need this one, but we'll use it later, so I'm just going to leave it in there. So I'm going to switch back to my Sprite 1. These are generic names, and you will lose points if you leave your sprites named generically. So make sure that you always rename your sprite. If you want to use a two-word name, like my sprite, you cannot name it with spaces. You cannot have any spaces in any of your asset names. Can't have spaces in your file name. Spaces in programming cause all kinds of issues and just will not work, will not be allowed. So if I wanted to name this my sprite, I could either put an underscore between the two words, my sprite, or I could use camel case, like we do with our name, my sprite. This is what I prefer. I like camel case. If you prefer using the underscores, that's fine too, but you need to choose a convention and stick with it. Either always use underscores or always use camel case. You really shouldn't mix the two together. It's considered bad programming. What I'm trying to teach you are industry standards. There are very specific naming conventions used in the industry. Again, this is camel case. Sprites should always start with a lowercase letter and typically one word. But if you want to use multiple words, if you need to, you can do that. Today, I want you to create this just as player. So we're just going to call this sprite player. And notice that there really isn't anything going on here. We can either draw our own sprite or we could import a sprite from someplace else. Right now I want you to click Edit Image and we're going to draw our own sprite. So in this image editor, we have a lot of tools, and the tools are pretty easy to use actually, and they're very well organized. Up at the top we have brushes. We have a single pixel, so when I draw that, it's going to be little. I've got a little bit bigger than that. So we have these different sizes of brushes that we can use. There are some circular brushes, kind of, but remember we're drawing in pixels. So this small circle isn't really a circle, it's really a cross. The next size circle is kind of a circle. And we can get bigger circles, and the bigger your circle is, the more it looks like a circle. But again, circles are always going to be pixelated. I can get rid of all of these by erasing it, or I can just undo. Control Z will undo everything I don't want. And my brush is a big round circle. I don't want it to be that. So I'm going to go back to my single pixel brush. This is the colors. These are the colors that are available to you by default. You can get custom colors. So if I click on one of these two colors down here on the left and right of my mouse, it'll bring up the color picker and I can create a custom color. So maybe I want this oh, maybe I want this dark purple, but I want it to be kind of see-through. Alpha is what will make your image more transparent. So 255 is completely solid. 0 is absolutely transparent. Nothing would be seen, but we can choose something in between. So maybe I want this purple, but I want it to be kind of transparent. I'm going to store this color. I'm just going to put it right there. And then I could choose another transparent color. And I like this green, so I'm going to store it. Make sure that that dotted square is moved over to an empty square and store it, because if the dotted square is around my green here and I choose a new color and make it blue and I want to store that, but it's around my green, when I store, I'm going to overwrite. Okay, so, whatever. I'm going to store those colors. This is a nice, useful method for storing within your game, because now when I open another sprite, if I come to the color picker, those colors would still be there, and I could use those colors for my sprite. I haven't figured out if there is a way to store those custom colors in this row, but what this row does store is all the colors that you pick from here. So if I choose yellow, it's going to be here. If I choose purple, it's going to add that to the colors that I've used. So these are going to be all the colors that you've used. Notice that I'm always changing this left color here. This has always remained black. This doesn't have to remain black. You pick this color, change this color by using your right mouse. So if I wanted this kind of fuchsia color, so I've got the fuchsia, got my purple, I've used my yellow before, I've chosen my yellow, I haven't actually used any of these. But down here, this is my mouse, this is my left mouse, this is my right mouse. So I can now draw in two colors. I'm using this paintbrush tool, which to me looks like a pencil tool. If they wanted to call it paintbrush, they should have used a paintbrush image. That's my opinion. No one really asked me. But this does make it easy to paint in two colors. So I can paint with my left mouse and I can paint with my right mouse. As you can see, I'm no great artist, so I don't usually use the paintbrush tool. But it does make it nice, easy, fast way to paint with two colors or to use two colors in your image without always having to change the color. I'm going to, again, undo this using my Control Z. I'm going to not use my paintbrush, but I'm going to use this paint bucket. Actually, let's talk about the eraser tool a little bit. So if I've drawn something over here and I don't want this here, I can choose my eraser tool. Up here, I can change the size of my brush. So if I erase with this little one, it's going to take me a long time to erase this. I want all this to be gone, so I'm just going to choose a bigger brush. Oh, that makes it a whole lot faster. Notice that both sides are the eraser, so it doesn't really matter whether you erase with the left mouse or the right mouse, you're just going to be erasing as long as you've chosen the eraser tool. So I'm going to choose this paint bucket or fill tool. I want to fill this with purple. I'm going to use my left mouse to do that. I could use my right mouse to fill it with pink, my left mouse to fill it with purple. I want it to be filled with purple. Then I'm going to change my left color to this yellow. So I'm going to point to that and click with my left mouse rather than my right mouse. So now I have yellow and this fuchsia color on my purple background. I'm going to skip these two for now. I'm going to choose the line tool. So the line tool, I'm going to make my cursor back small. The line tool will allow me to draw lines. So as long as I hold my mouse, it will draw a line, start, let go of my mouse, it will draw a line, start new, let go of my mouse. I can use my right mouse to draw lines in the other color. But if I'm trying to draw a straight line, I'm having a hard time drawing a straight line, especially if you have a shaky hand. If you use Shift and then draw your line, it will always be either flat horizontal, straight up vertical, or an exact 45-degree line. And those are the only three lines you can draw when you're holding your Shift key and using your mouse. Okay, so I don't want any of these here. I'm going to Control Z to get rid of them, because what I want is 3 horizontal lines on the bottom of my image. So I'm going to hold my Shift key to make sure that they're flat and use my left mouse, and then I'll use my right mouse, and then I'll use my left mouse. So I get these 3 lines, and that just indicates to me that that's the bottom of my image. I can change to 2 other colors. I'll use 2 shades of blue, and I'm going to draw straight lines down here. That will indicate that this is my left side. So if I move my player around or I flip my player around, I want to see the difference between my left side and my right side. Maybe I wanted that to be larger. So maybe I'll make that a little bit bigger, whatever. Okay, so I'm going to change my brush size back down again. And I want to look at these 3 tools because they are very interesting. These are actually, each one of them is 3 tools in one. So I have a top, a bottom, and I can choose the entire tool. So first, let's look at the top. If I choose the top of this rectangle and I draw with my left mouse and I draw with my right mouse, I'm getting outlines. So the outline is in the color of which mouse button you use. Let's look at the bottom of this rectangle. Now when I draw with my left mouse or I draw with my right mouse, I get a solid rectangle. If I choose both of these, and to do that you hold your Shift key to select both top and bottom. Now when I draw with my left mouse and I draw with my right mouse, I can get a rectangle that is solid on the inside and outlined on the outside, so I can't see through it to my background. This one you're going to see your background through. This one's going to be solid, but it doesn't have a border. This gives you a little picture frame. The border color is determined by the mouse button that you use. I used my left mouse here, so I get this left mouse color, light blue, and it fills with the right mouse. The circle is the same way. I'm going to select both the top and the bottom of the circle and draw with my left mouse. There's my circle. Not necessarily a circle, it can be an ellipse. So it's actually called the ellipse tool, not the circle tool. Then next to it, this is not a triangle tool. This is a polygon tool. That's because you can make any shape with it. And it's pretty curious. So suppose I decided I don't want any of these on here. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to make this back purple again. I'll use my paint bucket and I could change the inside of that. I could change, that's going to take me forever to do. So instead of that, I'm going to select with this dotted rectangle. That's a selection tool. In any drawing tool, if something is drawing software, if something is dotted, it's selection. So I'm going to select all of this stuff. Then I'm going to choose my fill tool and I'm going to fill that entire area. Makes that nice and easy. Okay, so now how do I get that selection gone? Again, choose my selection tool, click anywhere, and I can get rid of that selection. Okay, so let's look at this polygon tool. I'm going to choose the top of it only. Now, if I draw here purple on purple, we're not seeing anything. So I'm going to change my left color back to yellow. I'm going to draw click, click. If you drag, all you're doing is dragging that dot. Okay, so I'm clicking, not dragging. Click, click. Okay, so now I think I'd like to have this come out here. This is my intention, is to make this come out here. But if I click, it's going to click from my last point, which is over there. That wasn't really what I wanted. I'm getting this kind of wonky looking, but oh, it kind of looks like that. It kind of looks like a bird. So maybe I'll just keep that. In order to keep that, I'm going to have to click on another tool. Oh, but before we do that, let's look at what happens if I change it to the bottom. So right now it's outline. I could make it just fill. Or I could click top and bottom and make it outline filled. Outline left, filled right. I kind of like that. So I'm going to save it. But I'm still in this tool. So if I click over here, oh, I just messed it up. Control Z, that'll fix it. Okay, so how do I get rid of this tool? You just choose any other tool. Doesn't matter what tool you choose. You'll get this little pop-up that says, do you want to commit these changes? Yes, I do. I like that. Okay, I'm so sure I like this thing sticking out of here. So I'm going to try selecting it. So if I draw this rectangle, that's going to delete some of that. It's really not what I wanted. So I'm going to click out here to deselect that. I could use my eraser tool. So I'm going to use my eraser tool. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, not huge. And I want to erase this part. And then I'll change to my fill tool. I'll change that to purple. And I'll just fill that in. Okay, so now I have the bird. Oh, I like this bird. That works really well. So that's those three tools. Again, each tool is 3 in 1. Just an outline, just solid, or a framed solid. So this tool, this arc tool, this is really interesting. So we're going to see how that works. Now remember that I'm going to draw with my left color, and my left color is currently purple. I don't want it to be purple. So I'm going to choose this red right here. So with my red color, I'm going to click here on the bottom, on the corner of his beak, and then I'm going to click here. Now click here underneath of his beak. And then I'm going to click out here, but I'm not letting go of my mouse. So now I'm dragging this to make an arc. So I'm going to let go of my mouse. I'm going to click here. And I'm not real crazy about that, but that'll do. I'm going to click here, make a little arc there, bring that up a little bit. Then I'm going to click out here, and then I'm going to click back up here. And it's not great, but I was trying to make a fish. I'm no artist. So now I'm going to click off of this tool, any tool. You can click any tool. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't matter. I do want to save this, but now I'd kind of like to fill this in. So I'm going to use my fill tool, and I'm going to right click to fill it in. Oops, what happened there? That's because my arc wasn't closed. So I'm going to undo that. I could just close this with my pencil tool in red, make that. Now I will choose my paint bucket, come in here, right click, and it'll fill just that in. So here's my bird. He's carrying something. It was supposed to be a fish. Not sure what it looks like. So that's the arc tool. The text tool, I don't use this very often because if depending on how big your image is, text is going to be pretty good size. So if I wanted to call it something, write something on here, call it bird. One, the text is kind of pixelated and I don't really like it, but I'm going to leave that there just to show you something. Can I select it? Can I change its color? Let me see if I can change its color. Change its color to, I'm going to change it to black. There. Okay, so now when I click another tool and it asks me, do you want to commit your changes? Yes, I do. Okay, so it says bird. So we looked at this selection tool. I like to look at these two flip tools, but I also want to show you something else that's really cool. Okay, so I'm going to build a little shape up here. And I'm going to build a little yellow dot here, and that's good enough. Okay, so I like this shape and I like to put it a lot of places. Okay, so I'm going to first choose my selection tool. I'm going to draw a rectangle around it. I'm going to try and keep that rectangle really close to it. Okay, that's too big. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try and keep that rectangle really tight on my object. So I've got my shape selected. I'm going to use Control C. And notice that now that shape is a paintbrush. So I can draw a whole bunch of them. I can undo that. I can just click, click, click and put individuals someplace. I can, like I said, I can paint with it. Get some curious things going on sometimes when you paint with these new paintbrushes. To get rid of that paintbrush, you just choose a different paintbrush. Now I'm back on the pixel. And when I draw, I would be drawing pixels. Undo that. But this is just a really cool way to save a shape that you want to use over and over. I'm going to close the Sprite Editor by clicking on this X right here. And you'll see that there's my sprite. Okay, so this is a little big. I really don't want this sprite to be 64 by 64, so I'm going to change its size by clicking on these 4 arrows. Now here's what my sprite currently looks like, and it still looks like that because I haven't made any changes to it. This is my preview, and this will show you what it would look like if you commit your changes. So down here we have 2 panels, Scale Image and Resize Canvas. Scale Image is going to just make it bigger or smaller. And Resize Canvas, well, this is going to add canvas to it. So if I need it, I'm like, oh, this isn't big enough. I wanted a bigger sprite, so I want to enlarge this canvas. So I'm going to choose this instead. And these arrows, well, you choose the arrows depending on where you want your canvas. So if I don't choose anything and I change my canvas to 100 by 100, it keeps my bird in the middle and gives me canvas space around the outside. Okay. If I undo that and go back to this, now I resize my canvas. Whoops. Okay, so I guess if we change that back, now we're back to our regular. If I chose this corner and I made my canvas just wider, it would add some space over here. It's kind of made my bird a little wonky. So I want it to be, oops, not 1,000, that would be huge. So now there's my bird and I have this extra canvas space over here. So you can change the size of your canvas or add canvas to your shape by doing that. That's not what we want to do here. What I really want to do, all I want to do is scale this down to 32 by 32. This, where it says maintain aspect ratio, as long as that's checked, I only have to change one of these numbers and it will automatically change the second number. If that's unchecked, So let's change this back to 64. If we uncheck this and I want a shape that's taller than it is wide, I can change just the width and it will change the width of my shape. It looks kind of funny. It doesn't really look quite right here. That's because it shows it in a square, but it's really rectangular. I don't really want to apply that to show you because that's not what I want to have happen here, but I'm going to make this 32 by 32. So I want this to be 32 by 32. And they don't really look a whole lot different, although you can see that this one has become a little pixelated, a little strange. So when I apply this, it's going to shrink it down. Now, it has to remove some pixels in order to shrink it. So sometimes the pixels that get removed, I'm not real crazy about. So if you want to create sprites that are 32 by 32, sometimes you're better off to just go ahead and create that small sprite and do it, leave it that way to begin with. So, all right, well, I'm just going to leave this. That's fine. But over here, we need to call this player. For some reason, it changed its name back. I'm not sure when that happened. But always be careful that your sprites get named properly. So this is my player sprite, and I'm just going to leave it. It's just a placeholder anyhow, so it really doesn't matter what it looks like. Now you can close this sprite, or you can just open another sprite. So I'm going to click on Sprite 2, and you saw that move up there. So I can pull my canvas down, and now in my workspace, I've got both of these sprites open, which is fine. Okay, so this sprite, I want to show you this other tool. So we're going to change this to 32 by 32 to begin with. I'm just going to type 32, hit enter. It will automatically change both of them because maintain aspect ratio was checked. And I'm going to go into edit image. Now, first we're going to fill it. You'll find I use a lot of purple because I like purple. I'm going to fill it. And then I'm going to change to red. And I'm going to choose my arc tool. And I'm going to hopefully make a little heart image. It's not too bad. And I want to line the bottom of it up perfectly. Okay, so now we need to commit those changes. Now I'm going to select my shape, again, keeping that nice and tight on the shape. I'm going to copy it. So now again, I've made this as a paintbrush, so I could paint that shape all over the place. That's not what I have in mind. I'm going to choose this paintbrush. I'm going to choose this icon here that is my mirror brush. So it's going to take that brush and flip it so that when I paint, I can paint my pretty little heart. Okay, now I still have this paintbrush. So I can just change it to the pixel brush. So it looks like that. If I want to fill this heart with red, I could do that. It's just kind of cool. Cool little thing. There's also this one that flips it upside down. So if I chose my heart shape and used that now, oops, that's fill. I have to choose this brush and choose this. And now I can draw like that. Oops, choose this. And now I can draw it upside down. Now, which I don't really want to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this and name it heart. And then again, I could leave the sprite open or I can close it. We're just going to leave it open. I'm going to create a new sprite. And I'm going to open this editor. And this time, I'm going to draw, let's see, I'll draw a circle. That circle's not big enough. So I'm going to draw this circle, but I'm going to make it yellow. So here's my circle. So I have my circle. I'm going to draw a little face in here. I draw better with my left mouse, and I like to draw with black. So I'm just going to click this, and it will flip those two colors. I'm going to just draw a little face here. Put an eye there. Put an eye there. I'm going to make him a circular nose. And then I'm going to come back to a single pixel and make a happy face. Okay? Yeah, whatever. I'm going to make this animated. So I could just create a new frame by clicking on this plus. That gives me a new frame. But now I have to draw this whole thing over. So rather than do that, I am going to delete that frame. I'm going to right-click on this frame, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste. So I have a second frame. They're identical. Okay, but I'm going to choose this second frame so you know which one you're working in because it's underlined in green. Okay, so I'm choosing this second frame, and how I got that paintbrush, I'm going to make him frown. Now, I don't want this right here. So I could flip these colors back and use my paintbrush and do this, trying to fill that in, but it's more trouble than it's worth. So I could just make my paintbrush a little bit bigger and paint it in yellow. But somehow or another, I need to get rid of that. Then I'm going to make my paintbrush a little bit smaller. How big is that? No, I'm going to make it down to a pixel. I'm going to change this to black. And I'm going to draw a frowny face. Well, we're not so happy. There's a crooked frown, but that's okay. So now I've got two images. This is an animated image, and over here is a play button, and if I play it, it'll show you what it looks like. Okay, that's way too fast. So if I want it to smile and frown and smile and frown, if I really want this to be an animated image, I'm just going to come here. I'm going to, again, copy this. I could also use Control-C. And I'm going to paste it. Now it's pasting. So now it's pasted a bunch of happy faces. And I'm going to Control-C or right-click and choose Control and choose Copy. And you could right-click and choose Paste, or you can Control-V. I'm going to paste a bunch of these. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now when I run it, he's happy and sad and happy and sad and happy and sad and happy and sad. So that's a way to make an animated image. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to close it. And I'm going to call this face. And I'm going to leave it open also. Okay, so notice that as I create these, they are placed in alphabetical order, which makes it easy to find. So, you know, that's not too bad, but you cannot rearrange them. In the old version, you could rearrange them, but in the newer version, they've decided everything should be alphabetical. Okay, whatever. If I have the sprite chosen, you can see down here that it's animated, and you can play your animation from here also. If I choose my heart, you can see that it only has a single frame. There is no animation. That's all you get. Never changes. Same for the player, which is kind of a really nice feature that they've added lately. Okay, so I've got multiple sprites. I'm I'm just going to real quickly create a couple of other sprites that I want. And I don't like the fact that they're always 64 by 64 when I want them to be 32 by 32. So rather than having to resize them constantly, I'm going to come up here to File. I'm going to Preferences, Sprite Editor, and I'm going to change the default width and default height to 32 by 32. Okay, you do have to change both of them and click Apply. So now it didn't change this sprite, but the next sprite I create new sprite, will be 32 by 32. So I want my sprites to always be 32 by 32. I'm going to go ahead and change this one, but now as I create sprites, they will always be 32 by 32. I'm going to edit this sprite. I'm going to change this to green, and I'm going to paint down here a green. Okay, I'm tired of doing that, so I'm going to fill this in because that will be so much easier than trying to fill all that color in. Then I'm going to go back to my pencil tool. I'm going to make this a little wider, and I'm going to draw some stems here. What I'm going to do is create some flowers. So I'm going to create flowers that look like this. And kind of looks like a strange looking flower, but that's what I'm trying to create. Okay, flowers. I'm telling you, I'm no artist, so nothing new there. I'm going to put a yellow circle in the middle of it. And I like that flower. I don't want to try and draw that over and over, so I'm going to select it and Control C. So now I have it as a paintbrush, but notice that I've got that extra green on there. So I'm going to drop it right here. I'm going to choose my eraser tool, make it small, and I'm going to erase, very carefully erase the green. And I kind of don't like that, so I'm going to go ahead and with my pencil tool, make that maybe a little bit bigger. I like that flower. Maybe I'll put a red dot right there. Make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so now I'm going to select and find my corners and select just my flower and Control C again. So now I actually have two different flower brushes, but I want this one. I don't want that up there, so I'm going to select it. And actually, if I grab a hold of it, I can drag it and put it right there. And I'll select my flower tool, and I'll put another flower over here. And now, oops, what's wrong here? Well, it's because of that selection right there. So I have to go back to my selection tool, click outside to deselect, and then I'll draw my flower over here. Okay, so now I have 3 flowers. They don't look great, but you know, we're just gonna call it done. And I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna call it flowers. And then I've got this other sprite over here that I will edit. And again, I'm gonna use green. I'm gonna use this a little bit darker green. Use a little bit bigger brush. And I'm gonna do this. And what I'm doing now is I'm drawing in some grass. So we have like a little sprig of grass growing. And that's good enough. I like that. And I'll call this grass. And then I will create one more sprite and edit it. And I'm going to use this dark brown. And I'm going to try and make like a stump. I'm going to fill this in with brown, but I don't want it to be all just brown solid. So I'm going to choose this lighter brown and my pencil tool, and I'll draw some details in it, just some little bark. You know, maybe it has some black. Maybe it has some black spots on it. And does that look like a tree stump? Not really, but good enough. That's what we're going to call it. So I'm going to be done with that. I'm going to call that stump. And I'm going to make one more sprite. And this one is just going to be some solid color. It doesn't really matter what color it is. I'm going to make it red. And we're going to call this box. Okay, so now I'm all done with my sprites. Now, remember, I've left all of these open, so my workspace has gotten to be kind of a mess. And I could go in and close all of those, but the fastest way to close them all, make a new workspace, delete that workspace. Now I've got a clean workspace. So here's all my sprites. Sprites are not really useful. They're basically just placeholders for an image. Next up, using a sprite to create an object.